You are not ready for the Pokemon Legends ZA DLC because it is going to be insane, and in this video, I'm going to be telling you exactly why that is. The Mega Dimension DLC is set to come out sometime shortly after the release of the game, and it promises to deliver on two things: Megas and Dimensions, as the name of the DLC would suggest. Based on what we know about the DLC, and in my own personal opinion, I feel like this DLC could be offering an explanation as to where all of the new Megas are coming from that are being introduced in this game. I go more in depth into this idea in a previous video I made, but explaining why something new is here now in this game, but wasn't here in the previous games such as X and Y, is something that Game Freak really likes to do so that we don't have inconsistencies within the lore of the series as a whole. So telling a story as to where all of these new Megas have come from, which sounds like it could be a whole other alternate dimension, could be a part of what we see in this DLC. But it's not the only thing that I think this expansion is trying to accomplish. Another thing that I think the Mega Dimension DLC will be doing is offering a way for more Pokemon, and more specifically, more Mega Evolutions, to make their way into this game that wouldn't otherwise have a reason to be within the setting of Legends ZA. These would be Pokemon like Rayquaza, Latios, who naturally need to be in this game since they all have Megas, but don't really have a reason to be in the Kalos region, much less Lumiose City. And since Hoopa is a central figure in this game, and we have seen Hoopa being used for similar things in the past, like bringing legendary Pokemon to Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that wouldn't otherwise be there, I feel like it's pretty likely that this is another thing that the DLC could be setting out to accomplish as well. But I'm also very confident that it is also about much more than just bringing more Pokemon into the game. With Rayquaza in mind, and very possibly being brought into the game through this DLC, I think this DLC could actually have some pretty heavy plot and story, because we can already almost definitively say that Rayquaza is going to be involved somehow with this game through Quasartico, thanks to their various obvious connections to the Pokemon, and in particular with how one of their key members, Vinny, looks suspiciously like Mega Rayquaza itself. So with all of these connections being so apparent, and with Quasartico playing a major factor in this game, the likely possibility that the DLC is how Rayquaza will be brought into this game suggests that the plot and story of this DLC could actually be pretty substantial. And the thing is, there are plenty of other reasons to believe that this DLC is going to be quite substantial as well. For example, this DLC is going to cost $30, which, depending on whether you get the Switch 1 or Switch 2 versions of the game, is roughly half the cost of the base game, which is really significant. This technically could suggest that we could expect about half the content of the base game to be in the DLC, which obviously would be pretty sizable. On top of that, this is going to be one expansion as opposed to two halves of an expansion like we've seen with past games, so the story and content will likely be much more substantial simply because there will be more of a single coherent story to tell instead of it being broken up into parts. Another thing that is consistent with this idea as well is the idea of new Megas, because thanks to the reveal of Mega Raichu X and Y, we know that we are going to get new Megas in this DLC. Personally, I feel pretty confident that we could see somewhere in the realm of 15 new Megas added in the DLC, or at the very least 15 total new forms / Pokemon designs, depending on what the DLC has to offer. This is because this is roughly the number of new Pokemon and forms we saw in both the Sword and Shield DLC and the Scarlet and Violet DLC. And at the risk of mentioning leaks for ZA, so super quick spoiler warning if you don't want to hear about those, but in terms of the DLC being roughly around half the content of the base game, a number of around 15 new Megas / Pokemon designs lines up with what we know is coming in the base game. So everything just seems to be checking out, and the stars just really seem to be aligning in terms of the amount of content we can expect, which is really exciting. From there, we then start getting into the story content of the DLC, which is also shaping up to be pretty substantial too. There are already the Rayquaza implications I mentioned earlier, but on top of that, the website mentions a place in the DLC called Hyperspace Lumiose, which is on the other side of Hoopa's rings. This seems to be suggesting that another version of Lumiose City from an alternate dimension is going to play a factor here, and potentially offer an explanation as to where all these new megas are coming from, like I mentioned earlier. Additionally, given this will all take place after the main story of the game, all bets are off as to what these new megas could actually be. We've already seen one Pokemon getting 2 new megas, which is pretty crazy, and we could potentially see lots of other crazy stuff as well. Lots of people have been throwing around the idea of Mega Hoopa, since it seems to be the central Pokemon here. I've also heard Mega Deoxys being thrown around too, which makes sense, and with those kind of names in mind, plus everything else I have mentioned, I definitely think that it is very possible, as like a broad prediction if you will, that at least one legendary / mythical Pokemon could be getting a new Mega, which would obviously be a pretty big deal. And something else that's a pretty big deal is my merch store, because it helps to support videos just like this. If you enjoy my content, consider grabbing a plushie, a pack of trading cards, or both, and you will not only get a very high quality piece of merchandise featuring the Fakemon from my videos, but you will also be directly supporting the production of this content and help to keep it coming for years to come. So be sure to check that out with the link in the description. Any support is genuinely and honestly extremely appreciated. And with that said, let's get back to the video. And continuing with the story implications of the DLC, there's also something interesting with regards to the idea of an alternate Lumiose City being involved. Naturally, the story potential for something like that is unlimited, but there's something noteworthy that could be connected to this, and it would be absolutely massive if so. It was mentioned by the guys over on the Hidden Power podcast, so be sure to check them out, they're great, how this idea of an alternate Lumiose connects suspiciously well to how our rivals, Urbane and Tawny, are identical in appearance to the player characters, just with different outfits and hair colors. And speaking of their hair color, something I have also pointed out before is how the coloration of the rivals' hair actually matches the coloration of the logo of the entire game, which suggests not only a possible connection, but a huge amount of importance in terms of how significant the rivals will be to this story, and maybe the DLC is actually the answer to all this. Maybe the rivals look similar to us because they actually are us from Hyperspace Lumiose, and maybe part of the plot of the DLC is about discovering this and potentially them returning to their home in this alternate dimension. These are just a few ideas about what could be coming in this DLC, but it's crazy because each one of them is not only wild all on their own, but to me, each one of them makes a lot of sense and seems legitimately possible too. So I really do feel like we could be in for a treat with this DLC. You will have to let me know your own thoughts down in the comments though, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one, I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.